I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 150 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Dr. Bob Pondillo and I interview Amy Monsky. She's the executive director for Camp Quest Southeast, bringing a week of fun, friends, and free thought to kids and adults in North and South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. Amy first became involved in Camp Quest in 2010 after learning about it the previous year while searching for a secular alternative to Boy Scouts. After that first transformative week, Amy went on to found Camp Quest South Carolina, which now serves over 110 kids and is now expanding to locations throughout the Southeast, including Camp Quest Natchez Trace in Mississippi, operating for the first time this June, and Camp Quest Florida, which is tentatively set to open in 2018. Amy lives and breathes camp, and any of her free time is spent developing camp activities with her children as guinea pigs or reading about positive youth development and the latest articles from the American Camp Association. Amy lives with her family in Charleston, South Carolina. Back in February of this year, on episode 136, I interviewed Wendy Marsman, a Canadian ex-missionary, ex-Christian, who had such a moving story and made such an appeal for the need for more ex-Christian podcasts hosted by women and directed at women's issues, that I told her I would do anything within my means to help her launch that. Well, she's 9 episodes into her podcast called Women Beyond Belief, and I didn't even hear about it or have anything to do with it until recently. What I love about that is that after Wendy's episode, she and I became friends. We talked on the phone. She helped me with some personal issues and some lingering patriarchy that I still had hidden under the surface from my Christian years. And she grabbed podcasting by the balls, wrangled it into submission without me lifting a finger, or any man for that matter, to help her. And that's the kind of person Wendy is. Empowered, an overcomer, and doesn't need a man to help her do anything. So, my congrats to Wendy Marsman and the new Women Beyond Belief podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Another podcast I want to promote is called The Hinge. It's not actually out yet, but they have 2 episodes to give a taste of what to expect. One is called Hinge, The Making Of. It's a story-driven podcast that centers on Drew Sokol, a pastor, and Corey Markham, an atheist of Atheist Republic blogging, and their joint investigation into the life and claims about the historical figure Jesus Christ. You can find The Hinge, The Making of on iTunes or Stitcher, and their Kickstarter campaign by searching Hinge if you want to support what they're doing. Also, more information on hingepodcast.org. I obviously believe in podcasts. I started this one. It's going on 3 years, pretty close to 3 years as we speak. Podcasts saved my sanity. For the last 5 years, in my hour-long commute one way to Nashville and back every day, I am intrigued with multiple podcasts. I've told you before, Mark Maron, WTF, that's my favorite. I also have enjoyed Pete Holmes, called You Made It Weird. And then from there on, I just scan the globe. But what I want to celebrate today, more specifically, are the podcasts like Women Beyond Belief, The Hinge, Everyone's Agnostic, The Podunk Polymath, Atheist in the Trailer Park, The Scathing Atheist. I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there, and I love the freedom by which we all just started this. There's no FCC regulation. We're just saying what we want to say, and it's been a lifesaver to me. And specifically atheist podcasts or agnostic or post-Christian podcasts, because this process of questioning the very existence of God, the creator of all things, that's been sown into our brain since we were children, this is no small task, and sometimes we need permission to think those thoughts that we were thinking of thinking. Sometimes we get the courage to be horrifically honest with ourselves simply by hearing someone else express those exact thoughts that we'd been afraid to think, or maybe we thought we were crazy for thinking them. And when we hear normal people, just like us, say them out loud, we're emboldened. We're supported. We realize we're not crazy and that we're not alone. So here's me raising a glass to the medium of podcasts, the open source nature of starting one up, the freedom to say whatever we want without oversight by the FCC or Big Brother or intimidation by the Christian hegemonic juggernaut that has been passive-aggressively influencing Western culture for hundreds of years. We're here. We're bearing our souls. We're speaking our minds. We're getting honest, and I'm just taking this second to express my gratitude for the producers and listeners of honest podcasts. Can I get an amen? All right, on with the show and with our wonderful conversation with Amy Monsky about Camp Quest. I bawl like a baby in this one, so you are forewarned. We taped this conversation on April 9th, 2017. We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world's a better place when we live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Our show is available on most podcast platforms. Also, you can support us monetarily in two easy ways. You can pledge $1 per episode through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA Podcasts. And a big thanks to all our Patreon supporters. You can also leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated. Our opening monologue is still an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green, titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode was created by the Barry Orchestra, found at barryorchestra.bandcamp.com. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is. Well, Amy, you and I have been trying to get together for months.
So it seems. Yeah.
I don't remember the first time that we met, but I'm so intrigued with summer camp. I am a summer camp enthusiast to the hilt.
You're a fanatic. Well, didn't you counsel at summer camp? Or something?
From the age of 9 till I was in college, I have spent summers at summer camp.
Wow.
Wow.
I was a camp counselor my freshman year of college.
Yes, but these are all Christian camps.
All Christian camps.
But see, the thing about Amy,
this is secular camp.
This is atheist camp. Or do you call it atheist camp, Amy? What do you call it?
Actually, no, we don't call it atheist camp. Free thought camp.
Free thought.
Yeah, we want kids to think for themselves and to arrive at their own decisions, and then to be comfortable and confident in the decisions that they've arrived at. So it's okay to be an atheist, but you don't have to be an atheist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Just critical thinking skills.
Right.
Okay, so you could be a Christian and come?
We have had a few Christians come. They're not the most frequent campers, but we have occasionally had one. It's generally, we get mostly children from atheist and agnostic families. We try to not label the kids. Sometimes they'll label themselves, but we try to not label them. So we say that they're from free thinking families or from atheist families, or sometimes they come from a family where one parent is an atheist and one parent is a Christian.
Sure.
Gotcha.
I know that part of your motivation for getting involved in summer camps is you have children yourself, and you were like, hey, where's camp for my kids where they aren't going to try to get baptized or saved?
Right. And actually, it is my kids who brought me to find Camp Quest, but I wasn't actually looking for a summer camp. I was looking for an alternative to Boy Scouts.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only thing I could find was Camp Quest. So I wasn't really even looking for a camp per se, but a more of a scouting experience. Mm-hmm. But I found Camp Quest, and I fell in love with it, and I've been doing this ever since.
Okay, so we're going to hear more about Camp Quest, but I want to first ask you, were you ever a Christian, or did you ever have a childhood faith that you deconstructed from?
Yes, I was raised Catholic, and I was a believing Catholic.
Okay, to what extent? I mean, like, what's that look like for you practicing?
I believed that there was a God. I believed that there was Jesus as a real person and as the Son of God. I believed in Mary and her being impregnated by God. I believed that there was a personal relationship to some extent, and that God looked over and judged me. I believed in a purgatory and a heaven and a hell. And I went to a Catholic school for the first 4 years, and I looked back over my schoolwork a few years ago, and I found this drawing I had made with this like gold box that represented my heart, and where, you know, I had this temple in my heart that God lived in, and I had to make this for him. And I believed it. I remember believing it. Mm-hmm. And I went on to make my confirmation in middle school. My mom sent my sister and me to CCD classes.
Sure.
And I believed then. I believed up through high school.
Yeah.
Wow. How about
so what happened in high school? Well, before I get that, I want to go back and touch on this, because it is emphasized in the Bible, and especially by Paul, that your body and your heart is the temple of God and the Holy Spirit, and He lives in you. And it's part of this context that He admonishes us not to take that which is the temple of God and taint it with sleeping with a prostitute, or,
sex or anything
sin.
Like that.
That you are a vessel of holiness and stuff, and it's a lot to bear.
That's for sure.
You're carrying around God, and He doesn't like bad things.
No.
Right. And what is bad things, or what bad things are in terms of what God views them versus what is in terms of we as humans growing up. And the changes that our bodies go through. Yeah. And he's very real. It's very interesting.
Yeah, to say the least. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so back to my question where I was headed. So you were a believer, and you basically just gave us your statement of faith, which was...
Yeah, you kind of bought it all. Pretty
thorough.
Much. Yeah, everything.
You touched all the bases of the Nicene Creed, probably.
Yeah.
But what happened in high school?
Really, it was just maturing and being exposed to different people, being exposed to different ideas that go along with growing up, attractions to other people, the idea of sex, the idea of, as friends around me were, some of them getting pregnant, and then deciding what to do with that, and the ones that did carry babies, how that affected their lives and impacted their lives, and then going into college. But I know by the end of high school, I was definitely questioning this idea of God, that if God made me and everything that I am is a product of His creation, and yet I can profess to say anything I want. I have the choice of what comes out of my mouth. But what goes on inside my head and in my heart, the things that I believe, I don't have control of that. Like, I can't lie to myself. I can lie to everybody else. And as these inner thoughts were starting to happen and these inner dialogues and self-reflections were starting to happen, I found it harder and harder to reconcile that this God who had made me could then hold against me what I am and the thoughts that I have inside my head, regardless of what I say to other people. And that was the beginning for me of my questioning, is that there was this cognitive dissonance there.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah.
Gotcha.
It reminds me, we've got this wall of quotes here behind us.
Right.
And Bob, could you read this one?
Yeah, they told me to use the brain God gave me. I did. Now I'm an atheist. Ironic, isn't it?
Exactly. That was exactly it. I couldn't deny anymore what I felt inside. And I came to the conclusion that if there was a God and I led a good life according to the brain and the conscience that I have, that, you know, allegedly he gave me, then if he is truly an all-loving God, then I can still be welcomed into heaven because I did good.
Yeah.
And I did the best I could with what I had. And then if he didn't, then that wasn't an all-loving God.
Yeah. Well, he wouldn't let you in because of grace. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter how much good you do. If you don't believe in him, well, I'm sorry. You know,
right.
you're not.
Yeah, you're saved by grace, not by works.
Yeah, exactly. And you think, well, after the works, he'd say, yeah, well, you're pretty good. Come on in. But he wouldn't do that. You have to profess, right? You have to say yes.
Yeah, and the reason that that's true doctrinally is that the Christians had trouble coming up with how sinful, you know, could you be? Because even though you're professed and you're doing all this, and as hard as you try, I mean, Paul's confession was, I hate what I do, no matter how hard I try.
Right.
I can't stop doing these things. And so everybody felt, I'm just peering into the psyche of the founders here, but I think everybody felt hopeless.
Yeah.
Because actually nothing happens when you accept Jesus.
You're right. Well, didn't Augustine do the same thing? Like, oh God, help me stop, but not yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that was that was famous line of Augustine. But
like, I want to have a little more smooching and sex and stuff.
But but where do you draw the line? It's such a gray area. Like, if you've sinned 1,420 times in your lifetime, and 1,000,
and you counted them, apparently.
Well, God's counting.
Oh, he's counting, of course.
So
yeah.
But what's the threshold, for that? And so they just throw that whole out. They throw that
just
out.
Throw it out
and say it's a free gift. It's earned by nobody. And so works kind of go away. And then the book of James comes along and tries to restore works and says your faith without works is dead. And so they're constantly teetering and battling with, all right, you're not saved by works, but it doesn't give you license to be a sinner. And so you do need to
do something.
Stop sinning, but it's not why you're saved.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, gee whiz, it's kind of crazy.
And then there's the idea of confession, to where you can go and confess, at least within the Catholic faith, and be absolved of these sins. And I think even the Pope, didn't he say that even atheists could go to heaven? Or
yeah, I think so. Recently, yeah,
that's recently.
True. Yeah. I guess, but eventually you have to confess that extreme unction. I was a Catholic too. I was raised Catholic anyway, so I remember extreme unction and stuff, and where that's also called the last rites. Where I guess at the last rites you have to say, okay, yeah, I'm an atheist, but I kind of believe now, or something to get you in. You have to confess that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get your ticket punched. That's for sure.
Well, and I think here's another element of the psychology is I think that one thing that's very offensive to self-righteous people and to insecure people is this acceptance by God, like how special it is that he chose me, and so you're feeling special and you're feeling loved, and then you look over to your right and your left, and there's people that are repulsive to you, and they're getting in too.
Yeah.
And so they had to, erect more and more constrictions and prerequisites to get in, just so that they didn't feel lumped in with, all these other peoples. It's one of my favorite Dr. Seuss books, The Starbelly Sneetches.
Oh, right.
And the struggle of like who gets in and who gets out, and the need, the deep human need. And this is where Christianity appeals to the darker angels of our nature, the deep human need to feel superior to others. And Christianity affords that, or at least certain aspects of it does.
And would you say that this need to feel superior to others is part of tribalism, or would you say that's not exactly the same as tribalism?
I think it's part of it, don't you think?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a parcel, as they say.
Well, and here again, we're going to drill down to the denial of death and
Okay.
Ernest Becker, and that is, I'm afraid of dying,
Right.
and I need for my life to be significant. And so part of what drives misogyny, part of what drives racism is that, well, at least I'm a male, or at least I'm a white. And
Or at least I'm a Catholic, I guess.
yeah, it's just
something.
whatever, here again, tribalism and feeling the safety in numbers because we're scared. And so we want to feel like that we're on the right team, that we're, somehow superior.
Yeah.
This is why I'm fascinated by psychology, is why we do what we do, what drives us to do certain things. And are those things, those motivators that compel us to do certain things, are they true? Are they grounded? Are they founded in reality? Or is it some mythology and fantasy that I tell myself in order to feel better about myself?
Yeah,
And at
sure.
the end of the day, humanism is what is left, because none of this elevates us over each other. We're all just humans.
Yeah.
And so this tribalism, I hate this. This sounds like I've got the answer to everything. And I hate that too. But if we could just look at the one tribe.
Yeah.
And this is why we think sometimes that, if aliens, these movies about aliens invading, because at last,
Yes, we have to
our
bond together.
common enemy
Right.
is literally from outer space. And so the human race kind of bonds together in that
Right.
moment.
Exactly.
And if we could just do it without alien invasion, then we'd be
Even
pretty
better.
damn mature.
Yeah.
But I don't think that tribalism by itself is necessarily a bad thing. I think that there are some good things that go along with this feeling a part of a group.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can embrace that part of it, that how good it feels to belong
Yeah.
without demonizing the other,
Yeah.
if we can make it a feeling of inclusion rather than a feeling of superiority, I think that there can be a lot of good too.
Yeah. Well, that's
Thank
that's
you.
community. That's community, right?
And thank you for saying that, because I'm a huge fan of Bart Campolo and some of these people that promote community, like that's their real platform is promoting community, and that they would say the same thing, that there's tribalism is innate and actually it's DNA, because we are able to do more and live longer and prosper our seed better, if we actually combined our efforts and we banded together. So it's a part of our survival, and it's in us, and it can be a good thing. When it becomes a bad thing, just like Amy said, is when it becomes competitive. You need to feel superior, or you need to overcome the other tribes, and you can't celebrate their successes. That's when it becomes toxic, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that because it is innate, that with many of the things that, or with at least some of the things, issues in society, like with sex and teenagers and whatnot, that we need to quit fighting like what is and try to make it what should be, instead of look at what is and work with that. Instead of trying to change what our nature is to try to embrace the good parts of it while minimizing the risks that can go along with it.
That sounds like you're prescribing say yes to what is.
Well, I think that being fully aware of what we are and having solid self-reflection of where we're coming from and where we want to be, and to navigate that carefully, so that we have a solid foundation, but it's risk management too.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, there's a plaque on somebody's wall. I can't remember who it was. But it said, "Today I will not should on myself."
Should on my.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
And that's kind of what you're saying is instead of erecting something that we should be, it's dealing with reality.
Right. I think it's dealing with reality, having honest discussions with ourselves, being honest with ourselves about what reality is, and having goals and working towards these goals, but being realistic along the way.
Right.
Gotcha.
Going back to this theme of your deconversion, you discovered that I can't lie to myself, and I'm in pursuit of virtue, truth, love, compassion. And there was an article recently by Neil Carter, He blogs at Godless in Dixie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Our Biggest Mistake We Did As We Were Told.
Oh.
And he's talking about the deconverters and how we pursued truth. And, for those of us that pursued it right past Christianity, like in a lot of cases, in my case, my mom is deeply disappointed that I'm not a Christian anymore. Sure. And I want to say, I haven't said, because this would not be a nice thing to say, but the truth is that, Mom, I'm where I am today because you taught me well. You taught me. I'm doing as I was told.
Right.
And if you're honest,
yeah,
and you're not attached to a certain narrative, then you can keep going.
Yeah.
Right. It's sort of this mission to write your narrative as you go instead of stay with this narrative that you were given.
Right. I love the evolution of thought because, arrival should be a bad thing. Like arrival is the cessation of evolution. I mean, you're.
Oh, I see.
You're you're sojourning. You're seeking. You're learning. Mm-hmm. Well, all of that stops when you have arrived at your conclusion of this is the meaning of life and this is who I am or whatever, and you're tethered to that such that you can't progress.
Yeah.
Right. I think that you can reach milestones, but then you can't
Absolutely.
stop at that milestone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And ironically, in the scriptures, and especially the Hebrew Bible, the children of Israel, and we know this is mythology, it didn't happen, but the story really, there's a point here that confirms what we're talking about, and that is the children of Israel wandering through the desert. God did not want them to erect stone buildings. They lived in tents so that they could stay mobile.
Keep traveling,
because the sun, the God was the fire by night to light up their dark camps, and he was the cloud by day to protect them from sunburn. But the fire and the cloud would move and keep moving. Mm-hmm. And so, there was one point where a Jewish person was tempted to marry a Canaanite. And one of the indicting comments that is made about the Canaanites is that they make stone buildings. We are tent people.
That's right. We're tent people.
We're big tent people.
That's right.
You remember that comedian?
That's right.
Anyway, we're talking about mobility, and there's actually some scriptures that support that, and ironically.
And that's something.
Okay, Amy, we've got your high school, we got your college. What did you study in college?
Anthropology. When I was in 7th grade, my Spanish class took a trip to Mexico, and we went to the Yucatan Peninsula and visited several Mayan ruins. Uh-huh. And looking back through my life, I think that perhaps this was the only time, but I definitely felt the sense of awe. Mm-hmm. Standing on top of these temples, these ancient temples, and imagining, as I touched them with my feet going up, imagining what these people that came before me, their feet touching these steps, and their hands touching these walls, and their eyes looking at the same, or similar anyway, it's changed a lot, landscape, and to kind of identify with this people and to know how much they valued the sacred. Mm-hmm. And looking at it through their eyes, I could sort of feel this sense of sacred. Mm-hmm. Not that I believed that there was anything beyond that. At that time, I was still a Catholic and still believed in God. But I definitely had this feeling of awe that came over me. And so that became what I wanted to study. Mm-hmm. And so I chose Vanderbilt to go to study because at the time, Arthur Demarest, who was the leading Mayan person at the time, was there. And even after all of that, I never had a class by him. And I sort of changed once I got there, but it was anthropology, and just a study of people that was so fascinating to me. And I think still kind of informs what I find interesting today with how people interact with each other, with sociology and psychology as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's what I studied, and that's where I kind of came from with that sense of awe. And I think it's interesting, too, this book I read by Jonathan Haidt, The Happiness Hypothesis.
Right. Yes, that was one of his first.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I love his other work as well, The Righteous Mind.
The Righteous Mind.
He talks about lots of things, and many of them have stayed with me, but this one in particular, he talks about this idea between the sacred and
profane or secular?
The profane. Profane. Yes, thank you.
Sacred and profane.
And I've thought about that a lot in terms of a secular life. And I think that, especially as atheists who come away from Christianity, that we want to shun anything that's sacred. But I think that can be a mistake. That to embrace something, this feeling of sacredness, doesn't necessarily mean that you embrace this idea of supernatural or mythical or of a god, but that you can elevate yourself, or this kind of transcendent, this experience of transcendence that can come every once in a while to separate ourselves. And this is, I think, what holidays, and I think he argues for this too, is valuing the sacred over the profane, that we go along in life with this everyday, same old day, same shit, different day kind of thing. But when we have holidays, we allow ourselves to elevate ourselves above the mundane or the profane. And as atheists, we will sometimes shun the sacred, but I don't think that we should. I think we should embrace kind of rising above or having this sense of transcendence. It was sort of this that I felt in Mexico so long ago.
Right. This is a fascinating subject because, and here again, the Bible actually kind of endorses this. Now, what I hear you saying, and what I feel a lot of times, is that when you touch something that feels transcendent and you're engaged, you're experiencing something like walking on the same stones as the Mayan people who held very different beliefs than your Catholic similar, but in both cases, I think what we're experiencing, and this is total anthropology, this is what humans do, meaning-making, storytelling, pattern-seeking creatures, and we get goosebumps, and we look for meaning, and we need purpose, and when we find something that kind of gives us that feeling of joy and awe. Connection, depth. That's when we are touching, if you will, the sacred. And then where we err is then we take that sacred, and let's just picture it as a glowing, fuzzy light. And then we try to contain that, and we build a box. A metal box, a wooden box, or whatever, and then that's the construct, which is Catholicism, or, oh, by the way, this is God, and God doesn't like shrimp, and we start to give specifics to that which we should leave the fuck alone, like leave it mysterious.
Yeah, right.
And so we can be humans who acknowledge like the magic occasionally of what we feel in life, whether it's a sunset or whatever, and resist the urge to not only give too much meaning to it, let it be ethereal, let it be mystical. And I'm not necessarily endorsing mysticism per se, but what I hear her saying, and that I agree with, is that we are, hopefully as free thinkers, averse and maybe resistant to binary thinking. And that's the sacred and the profane. And I think that there's something healthy about saying everything's sacred or nothing is sacred. One or the other, but as opposed to like creating us and thems and walls and tribalism, like the dark side of tribalism.
Yeah. I get the connection, or I get the sense that Amy, when she stepped on that stone, she had that deep connection of others were here before me, and wow, and
they were doing the best they could.
Yeah.
So that was a story of how I chose, and here, even when we talk, we are storytellers. Our humanity is, we are storytellers. So that's the story of how I came to study, or wanted to study, anthropology in college.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm personal friends with Arthur Demarest, so I'm sorry you didn't get a good class with him.
Are you really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, he works in the anthropology department. Yeah. How about that? Pretty cool.
He's a nut. I mean, he really is an eccentric personality. But he is probably one of the most world famous experts on the Mayan culture.
Yeah.
He's been on Discovery Channel, History Channel.
So let him know that his work left a mark on me in a positive way, that it was somewhat transformative to the direction that my life took.
Yeah.
How about that?
Well, I imagine you're not the only one. I mean, he's impacted a lot of students, but that's great. And I'm just making notes here, going back what I was trying to say about even the Bible endorses not building a construct. Is honestly, I think I've said this before. There's a few of the 10 Commandments that I get in a different way than Christians get that I think is really true, and that is, in a way, this whole graven images. Like don't build graven images, which is symbolic of don't put specifics to this God. Like they wouldn't, the Hebrews wouldn't even say his name,
right? Yeah,
because it would be profane.
How dare you think you could know what God is or speak his name?
And look at the damage that's been done to humanity when humans do think they know what God's thinking and saying and meaning and wanting. It's only when Christians get dogmatic and think that they can enforce that on everybody else that Christianity becomes toxic, or any religion for that matter.
Yeah.
Right. And even the Muslims have the rule that, to not draw Allah.
No, it's not Allah, it's Muhammad.
Oh, right, Muhammad.
Which I'm not gonna equate that, because I think that's bullshit. Because Muhammad's the human prophet. And to forbade us to mock a human, that's bullshit. But if they were saying, hey, don't draw Allah, which they probably are, because how could you draw Allah, or how could you draw God? Anyway, I don't think it's the same thing in my opinion.
I don't necessarily think it's the same thing, but I think that it's similar, and that
the intent.
It could be argued that they don't. Even if Muhammad was this real historical person at one time, he isn't now. And so it's his legacy that exists now. And so by drawing this, you are sort of drawing the legacy. So I don't think it's exactly the same, but I think that there is at least a parallel to some degree.
Yeah,
that's fine. I'm just saying that I like the fact that there is a deterrent to defining God. I don't like the fact that you're telling me that I can't make fun of a human being.
Right. Now, to dictate to other people that they can't do it, yes, I disagree with that. But when they impose it on themselves, I can see that what they're trying to do, from an outsider's point, it could be argued maybe that they're trying to not bring the sacred down to a profane level.
Exactly. That's what I mean when I said that it's only when religions try to impose it on people that don't share their beliefs and they become assholes.
Yeah.
Right.
And to kill somebody for drawing a human being, never righteous, never good, never okay.
No.
And I totally agree. But I want to look at something you said here.
Okay.
So you, as a person from Western civilization, from a Christian background, you look at Muhammad and say, this person.
Yeah.
You're looking at it through your lens, whereas they, might look at it differently, that it isn't just a person, that it's, a legacy or something. And I'm not defending that in any way. I'm just simply acknowledging, like, even how we look at other people's narratives, other people's stories, is through our own stories. And it's sometimes that lens that we have, that each of us has, can lead to differences of opinion and worse. So it's just kind of interesting.
It's divisive.
Divisive, yes.
For sure. But where we're not doing is we're not having differences of an opinion. One is true and one is false, and that is Muhammad was a human being, flawed and normal and non-divine. That's a fact. Now, I, as a Christian, I could relate to deifying a human being. We did it with Jesus. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into that with him, with a Muslim. Like last night, my wife and I went to a wedding. We ended up sitting at a table with a couple that are Mormons. And they just unpacked their Mormonism, and Mindy was asking them questions, and I wasn't. And I was not going to engage. I was not going to go there. Now, if they ask me what religion I am, then I'm going to, pull up a chair.
That's right. That'll be 20 minutes right there.
I'm going to destroy their Mormonism right before their eyes. But, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to destroy their Mormonism. But anyway, I'm not confrontational when it comes human to human, because I do think people are more important than things, and they're definitely more important than beliefs. And so I'm probably going to err on the side of respecting their humanity. See, there's this thing about respect. Bob, can you read that H.L. Mencken quote?
Yeah. We must respect the other fellow's religion, but only in the sense and to the extent that we respect his theory that his wife is beautiful and his children are smart. H.L. Mencken. Yeah, he was a grumpy old guy.
Well, let's move into the camp stuff, because as I started this show, I'm a huge proponent of camp, and I have been wanting to talk to you ever since we first met. I don't have any money, and I'm on a mission to find more money, because I would love to see this funded to the hilt.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
So talk about what you do. You're currently the executive director of Camp Quest Southeast.
Correct.
And that's like 6 or 7 states down here.
Yeah.
And you're building and developing camps in different states and different areas, and I'd love to help here in Tennessee.
Well, maybe there are people out there listening that might have the cash.
Well, let's just insert right here. How can they contact you if they want to help, or like ask you, is there any way I can help further this movement? Because summer camp for kids, secular, where they're not going to be, cornered into giving their heart to Jesus or something. How could they reach you?
Well, our website is www.campquestsc, as in South Carolina, because that's where we started, .org. Okay. And my email address is Amy, Amy.Monsky, Monsky, @campquest.org.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So they can check us out on our website. We have a donate page. Money is always, always helpful.
Yes, of course. Now, when you started, Amy, you mentioned you found Camp Quest. So there was a Camp Quest already happening before you got involved, apparently, right?
It's the craziest thing. Camp Quest has been around since 1996 and started in northern Kentucky. Huh. And at the time, I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and this was maybe an hour and a half away, and I was 21 years old that year. So if I had found it then, I could have been involved from the very beginning, and I was a great age to be a counselor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any age is great to be a counselor. Let me just clarify that. Mm-hmm. We have counselors in their 70s, but that would have been the perfect age for me. But no, I had to, wait, 15 years, 14 years, however many years it was, and move 600 miles away to find it. But I did. But yes, Camp Quest started in 1996 in northern Kentucky. I think the first year there were something like, 15 or 20 campers, maybe 12. I don't remember. Uh-huh. And it grew. Each year was maybe about the same. I don't know that they grew in numbers a whole lot, but it became stronger. Mm-hmm. And eventually they moved across the river to Ohio. So for 6 years, they were the only Camp Quest. In 2002, another camp in the Smoky Mountains started, and that was Camp Quest of the Smoky Mountains.
Wow.
And then I think it was a few more years after that Minnesota and Michigan started. And at that point, I lose a little track. I'd have to actually look to see. But at this point, we have around 15 or 16 locations across the country. Each of them are independent affiliates of Camp Quest National.
Wow. Isn't it odd that it starts in Kentucky? You would think that an idea like this would be like up in like Michigan or, Ohio, way up there, or I don't know, Maine or something. Down south, you would think too Christian down here to come up with an atheist camp, But
there's also the larger need for it, too. So, maybe with the lack of other, truly secular options that have nothing to do with worldview. And I sometimes wonder if referring to ourselves as a secular camp is the right way to, because we're not without a worldview. Mm-hmm. I mean, we definitely promote humanistic values. It's just kind of God belief that we don't promote one way or the other. It's critical thinking there.
Yeah.
So in a culture that's dominated by Christian hegemony, take a drink, then, she's dead on, right? I mean, we could just say it's a camp, but we feel the need to separate or differentiate ourselves from the hegemonic thing, that the assumption in our culture is that it's Christian, because every goddamn camp in this, across this country is usually 99% of the time probably is rooted and founded and supported by some religion.
Don't Boy Scouts have a camp and what YMCA, YWCA?
And that's a great point, right? They're secular, but they're almost always dominated because of the persona that leads it or whatever. What do you think, Amy?
I think that's true. Is that most of the camps either have a direct connection to religion, even Jewish camps. I mean, there are even Jewish camps out there for Jewish children and promoting their Jewish worldview.
Sure.
But even for camps that you would think to be secular, and
neutral.
I don't necessarily think of neutral. Like 4-H camps, they will often still have like a prayer,
right?
Or
that's
some
the hegemony
reference.
I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Right. So even if they would consider themselves neutral, the reality is they're not. Somebody from a child from our here we get into the us and our community.
Yeah.
Would and the other thing that makes Camp Quest different in this regard is not just in the programming, but in the community itself. So even if, let's say my son, to have an example, my son were to go to a 4-H camp or another, allegedly neutral camp.
Boy Scout.
He still runs the risk, and risk is a strange word, but for lack of a better one, risk of somebody asking him, where does he go to church, or being judged on that. Whereas when you come to Camp Quest, the community there is different. They're not going to ask you that. It's safe here to talk about your views. So whereas these children that come to our camps may not be atheists, they may not have whatever view that adults would have. We don't want to label them. They come from a family that does, and they go to school where they have to often be quiet about what they think. Where here, when they come to Camp Quest, they're around other kids in the exact same boat, and they can talk freely about their and really develop their worldviews. Because at 12 years old or so, or younger or older, they're still developing their worldviews. They're still figuring out what they believe, what resonates with them, and belief really is what resonates with an individual.
Right.
And it's safe. So in camp, a camp experience, a good camp experience should always be about being safe first and foremost. And so we offer this specific type of safety.
Gotcha.
Among other types.
Yeah.
So I think that's really kind of what makes us different is the programming, but also the demographics.
Yeah. Well, so if I come to Camp Quest, or I want to bring my kids there to the summer camp, it's still camping and swimming and archery and canoeing and crafts and sing around the campfire and all that, but there's just no God talk? Is that the notion?
Pretty much. So we are very much a traditional summer camp, and the specific activities may vary from camp to camp based on the amenities that specific host camp offers. For instance, South Carolina has a zip line wall. Natchez Trace doesn't, but they have canoeing along this really cool Bear Creek that runs around the area.
I get it.
So, but really, we're have all of the trappings of a traditional summer camp, and I'm not going to say there is no God talk. There isn't any at the program level, because we really don't want to dictate what the kids believe. We put dots out there, and the kids can connect them. But there is talk, occasionally among campers.
Sure, for sure.
Oh yeah, so yeah, but you're right. So it's not
from a program. They don't talk about it,
right? So you don't have counselors or sing around the campfire. Let's sing about Jesus, kind of.
Right. There's no kumbaya.
No kumbaya. Yeah. Okay. Although a nice song.
But
yes,
you're not only are you not trying to stop, but you couldn't stop campers from laying in their bunks, even lights out, and they're all laying in their bunks looking straight up, but they're talking.
Yeah.
Right. And we wouldn't, because
awesome.
It's all about connection, and we're about connecting these kids to each other, and also because we are about free thinking. And if a child arrives at a different conclusion, that's okay.
They're free.
Because they're free to do that.
Sure.
And but we also take it a step further into being comfortable and confident, and you're right, so to speak. We all like to talk about rights, but your ability to feel secure and that not to feel less than somebody else. So children who identify as atheists should not feel less than a child who identifies as Christian.
So one of the subtitles of Camp Quest could be where your kids are not only safe on the horseback or canoe, but they're philosophically safe.
Exactly.
Philosophical.
Yeah.
I like that.
Exactly.
I like that. Yeah. So is it a large place? I mean, do you have like acres and acres of fun and dorms and all that stuff, or whatever you call them, cabins? I don't know.
Yeah, cabins. Yeah. It's really cool. The one that we're opening this year in Natchez Trace is at Tishomingo State Park. And we have the group site that's exclusive to us, but then we can also go about the larger park. And we are also working on trying to, because we're right off of the trace, we're working on taking a little mini field trip out to a couple of the sites along the way, to Bear Creek burial mounds.
Ooh, cool. Yeah, that's great.
This is so great.
It's like camp. In fact, it is camp.
Because it is camp.
That's right.
It is. And along the lines of what we were talking about earlier with being storytellers and creating our narrative, that's going to be the theme of Camp Quest Natchez Trace, is writing our story and being in charge of our story.
Great.
Yeah, that's great.
So will you do skits, sketches, or whatever, and those kind of things? And
we do. We have one of our trademark signature programs is cabin skit. So at the beginning, and each location does this a little different, but this is how we do it in the Southeast. At the beginning of the week, we give the kids a challenge to work on. We give them a couple of prompts, and then they work as a cabin throughout the week to develop a skit, then to perform at the end of the week. And this is one of our big ethical components of the camp programming. So we give them a problem to solve, or a problem to, not necessarily to solve, but a problem to think about. And it's usually a social issue that is a real life thing. And they're encouraged to really think about this issue and about how they see it and about how they would solve it or what they can contribute to it. So it not only helps them to think in terms of larger issues of society, but it encourages them to see themselves as agents of change, that they can make a difference, and even small differences add up. So it's really about empowering our campers and making them see themselves as what they are, these powerful beings. You know, who needs super beings when we have everything we need inside ourselves?
Sure, beautiful. I get it. So what are some of the examples, like, I don't know.
Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. Yeah,
like that, or abortion, or gun rights, or something. What do you talk about?
We try to keep it age appropriate, and our kids are 8 to 17. So we'll generally give the younger ones, for instance, a couple of years ago, our theme in South Carolina was superheroes, heroes and superpowers. And we really, because everybody loves a good superhero, but the reality when it comes down to it is we are our own superhero. And what does a hero look like? What makes somebody a hero?
And what is your superpower?
Yeah.
Right. What is your superpower? And more importantly, how will you use it for good?
Yeah.
So find in yourself what you are, what you're good at, and then what are you going to do with it? To be the agent of change. Yeah. So we gave them different issues, and for the younger kids, we gave them a little bit softer issues like bullying.
Well, that's a big issue, sure.
But it'd be age appropriate.
It's not quite like, gun control or abortion, but for the older campers, we give them a little bit deeper things. And then, we told them your job is to be a hero, but you can only use human abilities. You can only use natural abilities and go. And so they came up with these amazing skits. And it's really fascinating to watch what they come up with and to see their reality through their eyes and their perspective in their skits.
Yeah. I bet. Well, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, that's great. One thing that comes to mind is I think that there's always, like what I think Carl Jung called the shadow side of your strength. So you've got this strength, and let's say you're an empath. And that literally is kind of an X-Man type, type gift. But in human, in non-supernatural terms, you could be a person who's strongly empathic and empathetic to others. And what would be the strength of that, and where that could show up in real time and in reality? And what would be the downfall of that? Like, what is something that would be a pitfall of being an empath? Well, you carry too much, or you're burdened too heavily with other people's issues or whatever. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, helping kids navigate their own strengths and weaknesses is just a beautiful thing.
Great idea. Yeah, absolutely.
It is, and I would say the adults get just as much out of it as the kids do, because many times the adults have come from a background where they wish that they had this but didn't. And so they're going through it at the same time as the campers, just as adults.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Amy, anybody can be a camp counselor. We got a guy that's 70 that's a camp counselor. Yeah, tell me about that, because I'm approaching that age and I'm thinking, what can I do anymore? I'm not interested in canoeing. I don't want to, put a tent up. Leave me alone.
Yeah, what do you look for in counselors?
What can an old camp counselor do?
Really, the most important thing is attitude, and a youthful attitude. It's only 1 week, so on one hand, like, you can always see the end of the tunnel. Even on that first Sunday, I've only got this many more days left. But even with a week, it is intense. And I would be lying if I said that by Wednesday, I didn't have my head in a pillow crying, because it's just so intense. Not that things are going poorly, because they're always awesome, but it is very intense. And you're just on. But we have something that we offer the campers, and that's challenge by choice. And to some degree, it's the same thing for adults. So we look at abilities and try to place accordingly. Cabin counselors, beyond just being an intense position because you're with the campers pretty much all day long, it doesn't involve anything more physical than that.
Right.
Program leaders is another option. It's leading programming versus being with the kids more one-on-one. Leading programs either that are kind of more educational based, that have specific learning goals that are more academic, per se, more STEM, science and whatnot, or the elective type things that are just for fun, that the kids choose which activity they want. So that might be sports, which is definitely more physical, or it might be Socrates Cafe, this philosophical discussion group, or arts and crafts. Wow. Or it could even be leading like evening programming, like around the campfire, singing songs that really doesn't require a whole lot of physical exertion.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're talking. So just an aside, do you or will you eventually have camps, like a theater camp for secular kids, or a film camp, or like they have
that's way down the road.
Musicals? I don't know. Musical camps?
That would probably be way down the road, or at least for Southeast. Our 5-year plan right now is really to get just a basic Camp Quest location within a 4-hour drive of everybody in the Southeast. And beyond that, it's almost like a spiral. We're going to start spiraling back in and making locations that will hopefully be closer. And then that's in the longer term. The 5 years, we want to just get camps where people are within a 4-hour drive.
Yeah.
And then we're going to consider specialty camps, but probably more along the lines of a scientific discipline like marine biology, or something that the host camp itself could help out with programming. Yeah,
that's a great idea. So as the executive director, do you all you do is raise money, or what do you do?
Well, we're still very much a small outfit, so it's a lot of different hats that I wear. Fundraising, program development. I'm involved in the local camps. South Carolina Camp Quest will always be my baby. My 3 kids go there, but I'm so excited about the new camps, developing the new camps, reaching out. I'm at CAS at NanoCon in Nashville, where I went to table for Camp Quest Natchez Trace in 2016, and really meeting people. I love meeting people. And my favorite probably is developing programs, because it's just so much fun.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Well, and you got to call these people. You need kitchen staff. You need, if you have, like, say, a rifle range, you need somebody who's licensed in gun safety. If you have a corral, if you have horseback riding, you need wranglers that know how to handle horses. Sure. And somebody's got to put this team together.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of that, we're fortunate that a lot of our host camps provide some of those activities. Like in both camps that I manage, the food service is provided by the host camp. That's not true for all Camp Quest locations, but for us, so we're lucky there. And at South Carolina, the zip line and rock climbing wall are handled by our host camp.
Yeah, gotcha.
But in Natchez Trace, we could do rock climbing with the natural outcroppings there at Tishomingo, but we would have to have our own person. And because we don't quite have that just yet, we're an all volunteer run organization.
Right.
That's something that we don't get to do this year. But if somebody were, experienced and an expert at that, then we could offer that.
Okay. You're a sleepover camp, right? This is
Yes.
It's not a day camp, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And how much, if I'm a mom and I have 3 kids, mom and dad, and I want to send them, how much are we talking here for the camp?
For our camps in the Southeast, they're both $600.
And that's for 2 weeks or a week? What is that?
That's for 1 week. That's
1 week.
For us, it's for Sunday afternoon through Saturday morning.
Well, that's pretty good. Yeah,
And,
that's good.
It's very competitive with other camps. There are some that like 4-H camps that get a lot of funding from the state, and so they're subsidized, and so they can offer stuff lower. But for us,
right,
and the type of camp we are, it's pretty competitive.
But still, you're feeding them, you're housing them. I mean, you're entertaining them, teaching them. I mean, that's a pretty good deal. $600, yeah. And
we do offer financial aid. For those who need it, because we never want money to come between a child having this amazing experience and not. So we do work with parents, and so far we've never had somebody not come because we could not meet their needs.
Yeah,
I want to go back to something you said, Amy, that you were talking about it. Sometimes by Wednesday you get your head in a pillow screaming, crying. And whenever I was a summer camp counselor, it was at a YMCA camp outside of Tulsa, and I had a blast, everything. But I think there were 4, maybe even 5 sessions in one summer, and they were some of them were 1 week, some of them were 2 weeks. And the kids would pull up in these, Trailways buses, these Greyhound buses, and we would all the staff would come out, and we'd kind of put on costumes, or we would dress funny. Like now it's a style, but we would wear shorts with boots, or we'd have this big straw hat on, or we'd have like balloon, those balloon animals wrapped around our necks or whatever.
Yeah,
Hawaiian shirts or tambourines. I mean, we were
the way you dress now.
We were there
pretty much.
We were there to welcome the kids because we wanted. They're scared.
Yeah,
they're like, I'm going. Some kids can get hives the night before camp or something
because it's very.
They're going into a scary thing, and so we really bent over backwards to just make this a fun experience and welcome to camp. We're so glad you're here and you're special, or whatever. Just and as they'd come off the bus, we were high-fiving them and stuff, and we'd take them right into the auditorium where there'd just be this music and fun and icebreakers to meet each other. And I was cabin 9. I had probably a dozen guys that were in my cabin. We all bunked in the same cabin because it's summer. The cabin itself has no walls. It's just screens. So you got 2x4s. You got the studs holding up the roof, but the walls are screens. And so literally you're in the environment. Besides just keep the bugs out. Yeah. We'd go spend a night in the woods. We would acclimatize. We would play capture the flag. We would we did have horseback and canoeing and riflery.
We had a lot more money
and archery. This was
Christian, I'm sure.
Well, what I was saying, what was it? YMCA. It was YMCA. So they've got huge funding.
Yeah,
right.
And there was say week 1. I had this tremendous group of guys that we just bonded, and we had this tremendous experience. Week 2, really, it's the chemistry of the kids in your cabin, and it was just conflict.
Really?
I was just constantly separating, fights, and it was a horrible experience. Yeah. I mean, as far as how hard it was compared to that week 1. And it depends on, this is hard chemistry. Work, it's good work, it's worthy work. It's hot. Yeah. And a lot of times the showers are, not so domestic. And
that's a good
anyway, I'm just giving you, I'm trying to create an image of what this really looks like.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Amy, do you separate the boys from the girls, or do they all kind of bunk together or whatever?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. In our Southeast camps, we do have cabins that are separated by gender.
Okay.
With that said, we have had transgender campers. Well, and let me step back and say the reason that we separate our cabins by gender really has to do with the logistics of the building first and foremost. Our cabins have attached bathrooms. So that makes it a little harder, in my opinion. So, and it's just easier. Now, there are other, and I want to come back to transgender kids, but other Camp Quest locations, several of them do have a neutral cabin. They separate out by genders, but then they'll have like one neutral cabin that campers can opt into.
A commons or?
Like a common cabin or something? Yeah.
Wait,
right.
Where they sleep or where they just hang?
Where they sleep.
Oh, okay.
Where they sleep. Those cabins generally have separate bathhouses. So you can more easily separate out, the bodily function kind of things from the sleeping area. But ours, we can't. And I'm just not really ready to work on that yet. But what we do have is if we get transgender campers, and we try to make this very clear on our website that we are inclusive. We're radically inclusive. And even on our camper applications, we ask gender, and then we ask specifically, does your camper identify as gender nonconforming? Does your camper prefer a different pronoun? And we do that for two reasons. One is so that for the campers that are gender nonconforming, they can give us the information that they need. But we also try to set the expectation of parents of cisgender campers that there may be transgender campers at camp, and we do accommodate them and place them where they feel comfortable.
That's good. The question I have is, when you say, transgendered campers and kids, how old? I mean, when do you know you're transgender, I guess is the question.
So I can only repeat what I've heard from other people say because I am not transgender myself. Okay. But I've heard people say that really as young as 3 or 4 that they knew that they were a boy or a girl. For what it's worth, like when I was that young, I knew that I was a girl. And it wasn't just because of the way my body was shaped. Like I just felt like a girl. So I can't really answer that. But the transgender campers that we've had at camp have all been, older than 12.
Okay. I think it's great because you're gonna teach kids, don't be afraid of these folks. I mean, they're just people. They're like you, except this is what they like. So what's the problem, So.
Right. And it also helps normalize gender identity very much. And it also helps, we also have quite a few campers and staff members who are gay or lesbian.
Yeah.
Or, some vary in between. And so we normalize that. And we also want campers to kind of be able to distinguish that gender identity is not the same as sexual orientation. These are really kind of two different ideas.
For sure.
Yeah, this is a big deal. I mean, right there, we're learning about how important this, the humanist camp is, because in Christian camps,
they're not going to talk about
that. Man, stay away. Everybody's afraid of everybody else.
Exist.
If you're gay, if you're not like me, if you're, it's
right.
amazing.
They don't acknowledge that it exists.
Yeah, right. Or they'll try to pray it away or something.
Right. And so we, want to normalize these ideas, and also for kids to embrace themselves, and for the adults in the community to look at, a child who identifies as a gender differently than, assigned at birth, and to say, you are awesome just the way you are, and we like you just the way you are. And if you prefer a different pronoun, that's what we will use, because that is respect to you, and we value you.
That's great.
And not just in embracing kids with different ideas of God, and saying, once you've arrived at these conclusions, embrace yourself and be prepared to be proud of who you are and confident, but it's also in everything about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Wow, I'm telling you, that is very wholesome. That is a great little notion. I love that.
Some of the best experiences of my life were at summer camp.
Yeah.
I want so badly for secular, non-religious kids to have access to these same great experiences and joys and life-changing experiences without the threat of being indoctrinated or proselytized. Yeah. If I was a millionaire, I would throw it. I would
throw money at you.
I really would. Of all the causes that we've ever had on this show, or that's out there, this is one I could 100% get behind.
Yeah, this is the future.
And if I haven't, and I hadn't said it already, but I want to say thank you, Amy.
thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
so
I
sweet.
know this is hard work, and I know that it's thankless, and I know that there's no money, and yet it's such a great work. And if more and more kids, I know that you said something in your bio that 110 kids in your region have been impacted by it. You know, that number, if it could just go up and up, like you said, and you said you're doing 1 week session every summer, and I was a part of a camp that did 5 in every summer. It's like if you could double and triple and quadruple your impact, that would just be amazing.
It really would.
Yeah.
It really would.
You said something earlier. I want to go back and ask what it means, and I may or may not include this in the show. But what did you mean? What is this thing called challenge by choice?
Okay, so challenge by choice is presenting the campers with a challenge. Let's use, for example, a rock climbing wall.
Yeah.
And we can encourage them, but we don't force them. We don't force them outside their comfort zone if they don't want to. But we're there to root them on if they do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I got a story about that. We had back, let's see, this would have been 1985. I was a summer camp counselor at Takatoka. Camp Takatoka. We used to call it Takatoka.
That's right. I bet.
out in west or eastern Oklahoma. And we had ropes course. It was one of the first ropes course in the state. It was very, ropes course was kind of a new thing back in the 80s.
I don't even know what that is. You hang on them, or what do you do? You
That's the thing
or?
is it's there are a lot of different team building exercises. Some of them are individual building. So if you had, say, a rope bridge that you had to get across,
right,
and you pretend the water is, lava or something, and then your whole cabin, your whole team has to get across this rope, and you have to figure out how to do it. And the only way, built into the design, the only way to do it is if they hold hands, something like that.
Yeah, right.
But they have to figure it out, or it's just really team building. And then you had these individual exercises where you have a wall that you're going to climb, and at the top of the wall is what we used to call a pamper pole, and you had to climb to the top. It was basically a telephone pole.
Okay.
You climb to the top of it, and believe me, even if you've got there's pegs where you're climbing up, to get from that top peg where your foot and hand are on to where your feet are standing on top of that telephone pole, which is barely even, it's not big enough to hold your feet. I mean,
holy cow.
Your feet hang over the edge when you're standing on it.
All right.
And then there's a trapeze, bar.
Like a swing? Yeah.
Swing, hanging out about 10 feet out or so. And you have to jump. Now, you're on belay.
Oh, okay.
You're on belay. So if you miss the trapeze, we're going to lower you down safely.
Yeah. You're not going to smash.
But you reach out and grab the trapeze, and many times kids would get up there to touch it, and then the weight of their body would rip it out of their hands or something, But at least they touched it, and we would compliment for what they did do,
Right.
Because you can't climb back down. That's one thing is you're going to get up there, you got to jump. And so one time we had a kid, and he was... I mean, we didn't know it then, but he might have been on the autism spectrum or something. He was a little bit different. And in animal kingdoms, you have your runts that everybody kills. And I think humans are very similar. If you have a runt in your cabin who's different, or he's eccentric, or he's weak in some way, then the bullies and, the alphas in the group, they tend to... it's ironic, like, of all people to pick on, you big brave bully,
Yeah, right.
the weakest guy in the cabin. And this was a kid in our cabin that was kind of that runt. And I was standing there. I had him on belay, like I've got him around my waist is the rope that's connected to his waist,
right?
And it's going through a pulley system that if he were to fall, I could lower him down slowly.
Yeah, you got him right.
He's climbing the wall, and there's. This is so emotional for me.
Oh, my goodness.
There's these kids, and the whole week we'd been trying to train them to, just love him, just accept him for who he is. And there's a group of kids standing around, and not the whole cabin, but there's just a couple of guys, and they were kind of the alphas. And they were standing here, and I said, hey, you guys encourage him. And so they start shouting and yelling and clapping, saying, you can do this. Bobby, or whatever his name is, you got this. And they're encouraging him, and he's climbing this wall, and he is frozen. Like, he gets to a place where he's like, I can't do this. And he literally pisses his pants. And his pants are soaking wet, piss is running down the wall. And I turned to these guys who would, under any other circumstance, completely bring attention to that. Mm-hmm. And say, hey, everybody, Bobby just pissed his pants. Come look at this. And I turned to them and I looked him in the eye. Mm-hmm. Once I noticed that he had peed his pants. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I didn't tell him what to do. I was like, you got a choice here, man. You can ridicule this kid or you can encourage this kid, and ball's in your court. Mm-hmm. And that moment, those guys grew up. Mm. You know, I mean, that moment they got to choose life and death. You know, they got to choose love and judgment. Mm-hmm. And they helped that kid, and he climbed that goddamn wall.
So they encouraged him
with his, you know, his pants are soaked, but it was just a tremendous thing. At the end of that thing, everybody was just really cheering, and obviously we were trying to protect him from the self-shaming that he was apt to do with urine all over his pants. This is the kind of stuff, man.
Yeah,
this is the kind of stuff.
These are almost milestones in a life. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, it's transformative, and I've got tears in my eyes. And this stuff happens. I mean, like, this is real, and you know, I've had similar, not quite to that extent, but moments where I've seen campers just in an instant, like they get it. And this is where this comes from, that they are agents of change. And how will you use your powers when it comes down to it? Yeah. Will you use them for good? And look what you can do.
Yeah.
Look at the difference you can make.
All right, so there's a video out now that's just gone viral in this last couple of weeks. My son binged watched it, and it's called 13 Reasons Why.
Oh yeah, I'm watching it on Netflix.
And there's 13 episodes. Yeah. It's based on a novel, I think, but there's a girl who eventually commits suicide, and she records audio tapes. I haven't seen
audio
it yet.
tapes. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and she basically chronicles 13 different reasons and people who negatively impacted her in a way, and were reasons why she commits suicide at the end.
Yeah, sort of says, here's another reason. Here's another brick in the wall.
Well, this week in the news, I don't know if you saw this, Amy or Bob, but there was an 11-year-old boy in Michigan who he had a 13-year-old girlfriend, and his parents had discouraged him from having an older girlfriend, and it was kind of weird. But this 13-year-old girlfriend and her friends, they staged a prank on this 11-year-old boy.
I did hear about this.
So she had been telling him, I'm thinking about killing myself. And this was all part of the prank.
Right.
And then her friends, you know, convey to him through social media or texting or something that she had in fact done it.
Killed herself.
And they provided like pictures or something to prove it. And
Which
this little 11-year-old boy got so distraught and so heartbroken that he killed himself, and he really did.
Right.
And,
oh my God.
And the parents are suing and everything else. But the point is, what you just said, Amy, is you can use your superpower, you can use your gifts, you can use your natural, innate talents and empathies and compassions for your fellow man, and you can build up or you can destroy. And it's so evident right now. And teaching kids at a summer camp, and how much, I mean, obviously, this goes without saying, but how much better it feels to have made somebody feel better about themselves than made them want to kill themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
An incredibly validating and empowering feeling to look at somebody and to know that they're here just a little bit longer because of something that you've done, or that smile is because of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you did that, and you helped that. And well, anyway, obviously, I'm a big proponent of this work.
You really are. You're into it, man. I get that too.
So let's go to maybe some lighthearted questions for Amy. Like, what do you do for fun? You and your husband, or what's hobbies or movies, or what's going on there?
So this is always a somewhat difficult question to answer, because what I do for fun is more camp stuff. Yeah. Really,
it's your passion.
This is what I do. Yeah. And it's so much fun, reading, the books that I'm reading right now. I have Learning Leadership, How to Develop Outstanding Teen Leadership Training Programs at Camp. be an expert with map and compass, 101 nature activities for kids, and so on, like just more and more. I can't get enough of it. And and to train, and I'm so lucky. Like this is what I get to do. Yeah. And I get to take these adults and help them be leaders so that they can go on and do. And this is what Amanda Metzges, the former executive director of Camp Quest National, I feel like did for me, is that she really helped me to be a leader. She was there for me and really kind of encouraged me. And this, I think, goes off on a different tangent, but what gives people hope? Mm-hmm. And I feel like finding hope is not the right question. Where do you find hope? I don't think that's the right question, because I don't think people find hope. I think hope finds them. I think hope is kind of the world around us, and it's the connections that we have, like our friends and the campers and these other people that, you know, when you hear about Camp Quest, you're like, oh, wow, this, you know, gives me hope for the future. And I really think it's the connections around us that provide the hope. So getting back to your question, though, I don't really watch a lot of movies. I don't really watch a lot of TV. I do like to watch Bob's Burgers. I think that's pretty awesome and hilarious.
It's great. I enjoy it. Yeah.
And one of the things that I love about that is, you know, this brother and two sisters, they are there for each other. Mm-hmm. You know, they are always together and looking out for each other, and the family too, and they accept each other and their weirdnesses, but they love each other anyway. Yeah. And so I love, and it's so funny. That show is just, you know, hilarious.
It cracks me up. I like Gene the best. He's very funny. He says the funniest things. So you weren't a camper then when you were a kid, I suppose. You didn't go to a lot of camps?
I didn't go to a lot of camps. I did go to a couple in 4-H camps, and I really can't say that they were exactly transformative for me. I remembered them, but beyond that, they were just camp. So, you know, I don't know what to say about that.
No, that's cool.
Do you need to get the door?
Oh, no, I'm sorry you heard that. My daughter's going to get that.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
That type of doorbell ring makes me think of Avon calling.
That's right. Ding dong. Ding dong.
Or the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses, that's right. Or the Mormons. That's right.
That would be funny, but no, in this case, it's just her friends.
Well, in South Carolina, you know, I'm telling you, this is, I mean, first of all, a camp for, you know, secular kids, that's difficult. And then being in the South, I think that's difficult as well. So it's like an uphill climb, but apparently it's working out, huh?
Right. Well, because you reach a point where you have to decide. You have to decide, am I going to live in sort of what feels like this oppressive culture, which was somewhat my experience, or you've got to break out. Just a quick little backstory about how I came out as an atheist, because I started identifying as an atheist around 17, but it wasn't really until I moved to South Carolina in 2005 that, and a few years after that, actually, that I started being out, because I moved here from Louisville, Kentucky in 2005. My oldest was getting ready to start kindergarten, and I was pregnant with my daughter. I had no friends here, you know, no family here. And as a stay-at-home mom, my kids were everything. Everything I did revolved around them. And so I became a volunteer at my child's school, and I met lots of great women there. And they were great women, but every single one of them talked about their church. Not necessarily in a preachy sort of way, but, you know, I did this weekend with my church. And so I felt like an outsider to some extent, not because they intentionally made me feel that, but because it was very clear that this was something that was important, and something that they valued, and here I was, this atheist. So I kept it quiet. I did eventually find the atheist group here, the Secular Humanists of the Low Country, which was very important for my ultimate transformation with Camp Quest and really as an atheist activist. And so I started to find allies with them, and it made it easier to be a little bit more open, because all my eggs weren't in that one basket. Well, probably around 2008 or 2009, a woman moved in down the street with kids the same age as mine, and they started riding the bus together to school, and I became friends with her. And I felt that I would become pretty good friends with her. So I told her early on that I was an atheist, but that I was kind of quiet about it because I didn't want to be judged. And she told me that she was sad for me, which should have been an indicator, but that she could accept me. So we continued to be friends. And that year I was the parent volunteer coordinator at the school. And I had made it very clear that I didn't want anybody at the school to know because I didn't want that to affect me. I didn't want it to affect my child. Well, at the end of the school year, she and I had a falling out. And a few days later, the bus stop was across the street from my house. It was down the street from her, across from my house. And so one day I was folding laundry in my dining room, watching out the window for the bus, and I see her approach the bus stop. And she crosses the street to my mailbox, opens it up and puts something in my mailbox and walks back across the street. So I went to get it, and inside it I found this 9-page printout of where at the time, this was before Facebook, really, there were forums. And the Secular Humanists of the Low Country had a forum. And my handle was not my name, but in this conversation, I identified myself by name. And because you had to have an ID and you had to log in, I thought it was private. But it apparently wasn't. If you Google my name, this came up. I didn't know it. But I identified myself by name and said that I was learning about Camp Quest. Had anybody heard about it? I'm an atheist. My son, I want to send So I laid it out, and she had found it and printed it out. Nothing else on it other than this.
I know this about you.
I know
it's like
you.
Blackmail.
Yeah. That's right. I learned it.
Yeah. And, literally in the mail even. And I decided then I'm going to do this on my terms. I can either live in fear, or I can come out and I can do it on my terms. And that was the last day I was ever quiet. One of the pieces of advice that was given to me on that forum over something else was, it is better to be hated for who you are than loved for who you're not.
There you go.
And I took that to heart. And so this act of hate that this woman did turned out really to be one of the best things that she could have done for me, because I came out, fuck her. Yeah. I'm going to do this on my own. Right. And she lit the fire into my butt. And if it hadn't been for her, I may still be here where I am at some point, but not as early as this. So I thank you.
Yeah.
You know who you are out there, who will never listen to this anyway. But I thank you.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
There is an extent in where we're saying that, the culture is only as oppressive as you let it.
Right.
And secondly, Bob, you were asking earlier, of all places for Camp Quest to start, Kentucky, when there's something to push against, that's where the energy comes from. Because we all know kind of what we're saying. We said it earlier, and we said we wish we could just call this camp instead of having to label it as secular or atheist, is that this whole thing, this whole pushing back against Christian hegemony should not be a thing. There shouldn't be fantasies that are followed with such vigor that they are imposed in the State House and all. This shit, this fairy tale should not be showing up in public places and in intellectual spaces and in adult spaces, but it is. And so it's, I know Bill Maher has said before that he loves coming to the South, because these people come out in droves. You would think like his booking agent would say, you don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. Yeah. He says, no. These people need me more than secular cultures. Yeah. Northeast or West Coast or East Coast. These people in the flyover states are dying for a Bill Maher to come along and make them laugh, because their lives are hard. Yeah. It is in this crucible that people like Amy come forth. Yeah. It generates us to, like she said, light a fire under our eyes.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, it kind of makes sense when you put it that way. Absolutely.
And I will say, kind of to take that a step further, and that way we can kind of use the ideas of tribalism here, because as far as we can reach out to the people that are like-minded and say, hey, here's a place for us that is for us.
Well, and it's ironic, but personal development happens best in the context of community.
Right. And I think that goes along with the ideas with youth development, is that until your basic needs are met and you feel safe, you cannot grow. Yeah. Because you exert your energy to feel safe. Yeah. And once those are resolved, then you can exert your energy to grow.
Yeah, and loneliness imposes a straitjacket. It's an invisible straitjacket that you don't know you're in. But when you feel like you're the only one that's had an abortion, you feel like you're the only one that is an atheist in a culture. You feel like you're the only one that's transgender, and you're kept in that prison of loneliness. It is going to stunt your personal development, and it's when you find community just by hearing someone else's story that you relate to. Oh my God, I'm not alone. That's when some real growth begins.
Right. Yeah, and when I moved to South Carolina, I joined a mom's group. It was an online thing, a Yahoo group, way back then. But I hadn't met anybody in person. And so one time somebody was having a yard sale. And I thought, well, I'll at least go to this because I'll at least meet somebody. So I did. I went to this yard sale. And there happened to be another mom from the group there as well. Her name is Casey. And we... the three of us were talking, me, Casey, and the woman, I don't remember her name, who had the yard sale. And I don't even remember how we got to this point. But Casey just blurts out, well, I'm an atheist, so blah, blah, blah. And I looked at her and I'm like, oh, wow. And I think I quietly said to her, well, I am too. And so nothing ever came of that. Soon after that. But that seed had been planted in my head. And so all along, whenever I would see Casey post something, and it went years before I really saw her again, but we did eventually become friends. We did eventually form a secular moms group here in Charleston. Cool. But just knowing that at the time was so good for me because I knew I wasn't alone. Even if there was only one, and even if it was, just Casey, there was Casey.
Yeah. Yes, sure. Yeah.
Well, you're a fireball, and you got a lot. You're at work. You're making the world a better place, and it's been such a pleasure to hear your story and to share your story from a large platform that can help people hear about the work and get involved in the work. And money or time or volunteering, whatever people can do to help establish it in one of these southeast states.
Yeah. We'll put all that information up online.
For sure.
Yeah, and feel free to share the show with anybody you'd care to.
Yeah.
So. Oh, I will. Thank you so much. I've had so much fun. I love talking about stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. You. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, thanks very much, Amy.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Wow, little Miss Firecracker there. She has, I was going to mention that, she has a voice like a Smurfette. Hey, how are you? Yeah,
and talks really fast.
Yeah. But I think that's compelling. That makes you want to listen to her.
She reminds me of a male version of Neil Carter.
Oh, yeah.
Because he talks real fast and kind of has a nasal voice.
Yeah. But, boy, some great work.
Yeah, summer camps, I'm not going to repeat myself because I've already just told everybody how much I endorse it. But my kids, even as a secular and atheist myself, once we moved here and my faith deconstructed from 2006 to about 2010, and by then I was a full-blown atheist. Well, my kids are still teenagers. They're in high school, they're in middle school, and they got hooked up with an organization called Young Life.
Which is a Christian group, isn't it?
Yeah, very much Christian, and a very, very dynamic group. In fact, they are the kings of fun.
Oh, the Young Life, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Their summer camps are over the top. In fact, if I were to do a secular camp, I would completely model it after Young Life and the level. And
just take out the religious
Exactly,
stuff.
just take out the bait and switch. That's what I hate about these camps that are Christian is that they basically soften your heart all day long with all this fun activity and team building, and you're feeling warm and fuzzy. You're feeling a part of a group. You're feeling loved. And then they get you at night when you're tired and exhausted from the day, and they play some really emotional, heartstring-pulling songs, and then they basically say, God loves you so much that he gave his only begotten son for you.
Yeah.
And if you look, Jesus' arms are outstretched to you right now. His nail-scarred hands are reaching out to you. Who would say no to Jesus' offer of eternal life? And if you'll just walk down front here, we're going to pray for you, and you can literally start over your new life tonight. Ask Jesus into your heart, and he will wash you clean. He will make your old life, the past, and you have a new beginning with being filled and empowered by God himself inside your heart. And this is the offer that we offer you tonight or whatever.
Yeah, wow.
And
that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a lot of, I mean, you know, even all of us, me, I did bad things. I did things that I'm ashamed of, I regret and stuff. And you're telling me I can start over?
Yeah, clean slate, baby.
And I'm 16 years old? Maybe I buy that. Of course, now I'd say, shut up, go away.
Yeah,
you know,
nothing wrong with
I'm going to get a drink. I'll see you later. Yeah, but I understand that.
Powerful stuff. But I let my kids go, and I didn't do a whole lot of coaching, like be careful of this or that.
Sure.
I kind of wanted them to navigate it for themselves, and
I'm sure they laid back.
They saw through it, and even to this day, they're all four atheists, and they're around it all the time. We live in the South. Yeah. They all, you know, I would say their peers aren't as religious as most people. Like we've always said, the millennials are kind of stepping back a little bit from the Westboroughs or whatever of the world. I mean, they're not LGBTQ haters, you know.
Yeah,
even if they're, you know, Christian, most of them are like, oh, that's no big deal.
Live and let live. Yeah.
So it's not a big hegemonic thing for them, but they still see it. It comes up, and they'll run into people who believe it, and they'll either roll their eyes and shut up, or if there's some form of engagement, my kids will
just say it.
More than that, they'll tear it apart.
Oh, really?
No, they can.
Well, I know John, your son John, he's ready to debate.
Yeah, he really is.
He's a good guy.
But he's so excited about evolution. He's so excited about reality, and he feels it disrespectful and you know, it robs you. See, this is the thing. I went to, like I said, a wedding last night, and it's so foreign to me now because here you got two people making a commitment to each other. You got all these friends standing with them in support and witness. And it's this beautiful thing between two people. And then when the word God or the concept of God or God has a plan for this couple or whatever, when that came in last night, I wanted to say, how invasive. How dare you insert an imaginary friend as a third party into this two-party event. These are two individuals committing their love to each other, and how embarrassing to say, oh, and by the way, Papa Smurf's going to be with you.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think that's what John means, what you mean is disrespectful.
It's disrespectful, of the reality of what's really going on here, and why. Yeah. Why? Well, fear of death.
That's what we do.
Fear of hell.
Yeah.
Need for meaning. And we do this, but it's so ridiculous now that I've been out long enough. It's like, it just is. They might as well say, and Mother Goose is going to see to it that your marriage and your commitment to each other is
sanctified,
or whatever. Yes. And motherfucking Goose, what are you talking about? You know, it's that weird to me now.
Yeah,
So anyway, Amy Monsky, what a great show.
Yeah, and, terrific.
I think it was amy.monsky at campquest.org.
Yeah,
to reach her personally. Obviously, I was moved by the topic.
Oh, you were. You were.
And I'm excited for her. You know, when we asked her what you do for fun, she says, well, I just do camp stuff. And I didn't ask her, but my next question should have been, does your husband ever come to you and say, hey, honey, can you leave this camp shit alone and like go to the beach with me or something?
Yeah.
Like my wife was, because I'm so passionate about my things, in this case, the podcast, for example.
Yeah, sure.
That I work on the podcast almost every waking moment that I'm not doing my other two jobs.
Right.
And those of us that are impassioned about things, our lovers are often jealous and possessive of our time sometimes, to where it's like, hey, you gotta put that down and come
and see me a little. Come hang with me. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, good talk.
Yeah, always
See you
good.
out there.
Yeah, we'll try it again.
All right.
All right, thanks, guys.